They told me I should be grateful to be alive. I was, until I came home and found someone else had emptied my refrigerator, my dresser drawers, and my bank account. The walls of the hospital room still smelled like antiseptic when I signed the discharge papers. A young nurse with over-enthusiastic cheer wheeled me out, chatting about the weather, my lucky recovery, and how wonderful it must feel to be going home. I didn't answer. My voice hadn't yet returned to its full strength after the coma. That, and I didn't trust it not to shake. The taxi pulled up to my house, or what used to be my house. The same chipped white fence, the same creaky porch step that George, my late husband, always said he'd fix. But something felt off. The curtains weren't mine. The flower pots were gone. The welcome mat I'd crocheted myself had been replaced with one that said, in loopy gold letters, "Live, laugh, love." I didn't laugh. The key still worked, which felt like a small mercy. But inside, I stood frozen in the entryway, hand on the doorknob, afraid to take another step. The house didn't smell like lemon polish and old paperbacks anymore. It smelled like lavender plug-ins and someone else's perfume. Feminine. Sweet. Too sweet. My bedroom was the worst. Drawers empty. Closet thinned out. My nightstand, always cluttered with crossword books and hand cream, was wiped clean. My quilts, the ones I spent whole winters stitching, were gone. Only a gray duvet I didn't recognize remained. In the kitchen, there was almond milk in the fridge. I've never drunk almond milk in my life. A box of gluten-free crackers sat on the counter. Gluten-free? For who? I called out, even though I knew no one would answer. David? My son's name came out dry and unsure. Elise? Nothing. Just the low hum of the refrigerator that wasn't mine. On the dining table, I found a note, torn from a notepad I didn't own. Ruth, we'll be by this weekend to help you settle in. Don't worry about anything. Rest up. Love, D&D. Settle in? I whispered. This was my house. I wasn't a guest here. I'd lived here for 41 years. David was raised under this roof. And Elise, his wife. She only started coming here in her 30s, and never without a wine bottle and comments about my dated decor. I sat down slowly, legs trembling. A framed photo of George and me on our 40th anniversary was gone from the mantel. In its place, a generic print of a beach scene. That was the moment I realized. It wasn't just a matter of tidying. Someone had deliberately erased me. But it wasn't until I checked the mail pile by the door that I felt the true cold in my chest. A statement from my bank, marked Final Notice. It claimed my checking account had been closed. There were transactions listed that I didn't recognize. Wire transfers, all within the last 6 weeks, totaling more money than I had ever withdrawn in 1 year. And then, a second envelope. From Liberty Mutual Life Insurance. Inside was a letter that began, "We are pleased to confirm that the life insurance policy for Ruth E. Halberg, policy John 1873335, has been successfully processed and paid out to the designated beneficiary, Elise Halberg, on June 3rd, 2023. June 3rd, the day after I opened my eyes in the hospital. I stared at the words until they blurred. They had cashed out my death. I was still here, breathing, thinking, hurting, and somewhere out there, my daughter-in-law was living as the legal beneficiary of a $500,000 payout. A payout she couldn't have received without proof of death, without a death certificate, without telling the world, on paper at least, that I no longer existed. My hands shook as I set the letter down. I was alive, and apparently that was the problem. I spent that night sitting upright in the recliner, still in my coat. I didn't sleep. I didn't change. I didn't cry. I just sat there, as if moving would confirm what I feared most, that I no longer belonged here. At dawn, I made tea the way I always had. Same old kettle, chipped handle. The mug was new, though, one of those oversized novelty ones with a cat pun on it. Perfect morning. Not mine. Elise's taste, no doubt. I sipped anyway, not because I wanted tea, but because it was one of the last things that still felt like mine. By 8 a.m., I was standing in front of the bank, wearing the same coat I'd worn home. My legs ached, and my left hip still throbbed from the crash, but I stood straight. I wasn't going to sit down again until I had some answers. The young man at the reception desk blinked when I gave my name. Ruth Halberg? Yes. He glanced at his screen, then back at me. I'm sorry, ma'am. It says here the account holder is deceased. I looked him dead in the eye. Do I look deceased to you? His ears flushed red. No, ma'am, I want to speak with the manager. 5 minutes later, I was in a small glass office with a woman named Dana. Late 30s, probably someone's mother. She wore too much perfume and a look of carefully rehearsed professionalism. We understand this must be very upsetting, she said, fingers tented like she'd done this before. According to our records, your account was closed following the submission of a death certificate filed by your financial power of attorney, Elise Halberg. Elise is my daughter-in-law, not my executor, not my voice. She's never even held my hand. She had notarized documents, Dana said, signed by you last year. I never signed anything like that. Dana turned to her screen. The notary was a Camille Herrera, office in Raleigh. We can verify the signature, but I'll be honest with you, Mrs. Halberg. Once the certificate was filed and the funds transferred, the matter was processed as closed. I took a slow breath. Where did the money go? Dana hesitated. Ma'am, don't ma'am me. That was my life's savings. That was my husband's pension. I want the name, the account, the number. There was a pause. Then she pulled up a file. It was transferred to an account in Elise Halberg's name. Personal checking plus a joint account with David Halberg. My son. I thought of his hand on mine in the hospital, of how he said, "We were so scared we lost you." How he'd kissed my forehead, lied, so smoothly, like it cost him nothing. The room felt too quiet. The hum of the computer, the soft hiss of the ceiling vent, all of it faded into a pressure in my ears, as if my body couldn't decide whether to scream or shut down entirely. I stood up. I want printouts, all of them, every transaction, every document with my name on it. Dana looked uneasy. I'll do what I can, but legally the accounts are closed. Print them anyway. She nodded. It may take a few days. Then I'll be back in a few days. As I left, I stopped in the lobby, heart pounding. The air smelled of overwashed carpet and stale coffee. The world around me continued as if nothing had happened. People checking balances, updating debit cards, laughing about overdraft fees. And I had just learned I was legally dead. On the walk home, I passed by the pharmacy. I went in to check if my prescription records were still active. They weren't. The pharmacist, a kind woman who'd known me for years, was shocked. Your profile's been archived, honey. Last time we filled for you was May 18th. Then it was marked deceased. Do not renew. I left without saying a word. Back home, I checked my desk drawers. My old ID. My social security card, my birth certificate, all still there. But not a single piece of recent mail in my name. Not one bill, not one official letter. I sat on the bed I didn't recognize, in the room I no longer knew, staring at a framed quote Elise must have hung. Let go of what no longer serves you. And I realized they had. They'd let go of me. The next step wasn't rage. It was paperwork. I didn't have the luxury of dramatics, not when my legal existence had been quietly erased. I needed to reclaim it, piece by piece, signature by signature. I called Social Security first. It took an hour of holding, being transferred, and repeating my date of birth to skeptical clerks before I got to someone who listened. "You're saying someone filed your death certificate?" the woman asked, typing loudly. "I'm saying I'm very much alive and someone wanted me otherwise." There was silence. Then, "Hold, please." 8 more minutes. Then another voice, deeper, more formal. A man this time. "Mrs. Halberg, I'm looking at the file now. It shows you as deceased, as of May 30th. The death certificate was filed electronically by a hospital administrator. Do you have your ID?" "I do." "Can you come into a local office? You'll need to bring 2 forms of identification, and we'll initiate a reinstatement review. But I'll be frank. Reversing a death status isn't simple. It's rare. We'll need proof." "Such as?" "Medical records, a doctor's note, witnesses. We also flag for fraud if the original death certificate appears false." Fraud. The word tasted clean, cold, like metal. I made an appointment for the next morning. After hanging up, I sat for a long time on the living room sofa, arms folded over my chest, thinking. How far had David and Elise gone? Filing documents, shutting down accounts, emptying my home? They hadn't just wanted me gone. They had made sure I couldn't come back. The doorbell rang. I flinched, pulse spiking. I wasn't expecting anyone. I hadn't told anyone I was back. When I opened the door, it was my neighbor, old Harold from across the street. He'd known George. Still mowed his own lawn, even though he had no business doing it with his knees. "Ruth," he said, eyes wide. "Well, I'll be damned." I managed a smile. "Afraid not, Harold. Turns out I'm still kicking." He stepped forward, lowering his voice. "I saw the ambulance back in May. They said you'd... Well, Elise told us there was a memorial, said you didn't want visitors." That stopped me. "There was a memorial?" He nodded, somber. "They held it at St. Mary's. Small thing. Just family and a few neighbors. They even passed out little pamphlets with your picture. Elise cried through the whole thing. My own funeral. A woman I couldn't stand had cried at my funeral, while knowing I was alive and comatose." I gripped the doorframe to keep from swaying. "Harold, did you by chance keep one of those pamphlets?" He blinked. "Think I might have. You want it?" "Yes." 10 minutes later, I held it in my hands. A printed program. My name, a date of death. A stock photo of Lily's. A quote I never said. She lived a quiet life of service and dignity. I had lived a noisy life, damn it. A strong one. Built a business from nothing. Raised a child alone after George died. Paid for his college, his wedding, his down payment. And now I was a quiet footnote. Elise's idea of dignity was silence. But I wasn't quiet. Not anymore. I spent the afternoon calling the hospital, my charts, my records, every paper trail that proved I had been alive and breathing past the date on that memorial. The nurse at patient records sounded confused. "But, Mrs. Halberg, our file says you were discharged June 2nd. "I was. After waking from a coma. Then how— Wait. Who declared you dead? That's what I'm asking. She promised to pull the file and call back. I stared out the window as evening fell. The street looked the same. Kids on bikes. Harold sitting on his porch. Nothing had changed. Except me. I had been buried alive on paper. But tomorrow I was walking into Social Security with proof. I was coming back from the dead, and the people who buried me were going to wish they had done it properly. I wore my church coat to the Social Security office the next morning, not because I wanted to look nice, though I suppose that mattered too, but because it still smelled like me. Cedar, dust, the ghost of George's aftershave from where he used to hug me before leaving for work. I wanted to walk in as myself, not as a case number, not as a ghost. The building was crowded, and the air was thick with that strange blend of frustration and bureaucracy. Children crying, old men arguing about benefits, clerks behind windows tapping away without looking up. I waited almost 2 hours before my number was called. "Window 4, the speaker crackled. I stood up with effort and walked slowly, deliberately. I was still recovering, but I made sure not to limp. The last thing I needed was pity. I needed recognition. The man behind the glass had silver hair and a long scar across one hand. He looked like someone who'd seen too much to be easily surprised. "Ruth Halberg," I said, setting my folder down. He looked up. His eyes did a quick scan. My face, my documents, my presence. "I'll be damned," he muttered, then caught himself. "Sorry, ma'am. It's just, your file says you died. Yet, here I am." He opened the folder, flipping through my evidence. Doctor's note from the hospital. Discharge papers. A letter from the attending physician confirming the coma and the date I woke up. June 1st. 3 days after the date Elise listed as my death. He frowned. "And you say the death certificate was filed by Elise Halberg, my daughter-in-law, acting as my financial power of attorney. Do you have that document?" "I don't. I never signed one." He nodded. "Then we may be looking at fraud." He began typing, hands moving quickly. "We'll begin reinstatement proceedings. It'll take time, possibly weeks. Your benefits will be frozen until your status is corrected, but we'll expedite what we can. And the death certificate? We'll need to contact the issuing source, see who signed off. If it was forged or filed improperly, that's a legal issue." I leaned in slightly. "Do I need to hire a lawyer?" He met my eyes. I would. Back home, the quiet felt heavier. Not peaceful, not serene, just full of things unsaid. There was a message on the answering machine, Elise's voice. "Hi, Ruth. Just checking in. Hope you're adjusting okay. We'll swing by next weekend to bring groceries." Groceries. For the woman they'd declared legally dead. I deleted the message without listening to the rest. That night, I made a list on yellow notepad paper. The same kind George used for grocery lists. To reclaim, Social Security. In progress. Bank access, pending documents. Property deed, check registry life insurance, start process. Will, rewrite Elise's power of attorney. Void. Below that, I wrote one word in capital letters. Lawyer. Then I underlined it twice. The next day, I took the bus downtown. My knees protested every bump, but I ignored them. This wasn't just about money. It wasn't even about dignity anymore. It was about identity. I found a modest law office on Jefferson Street. Parker and Tills, attorneys at law. The name sounded old-fashioned, and that suited me fine. The receptionist tried to schedule me for next week, but I insisted. "I'm not leaving until I talk to someone." 10 minutes later, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a softer smile stepped out. "Ruth Halberg?" she asked. I stood. Yes. I'm Marion Tills. Come with me. Her office smelled like coffee and file folders. We sat. I told her everything: the coma, the death certificate, the emptied accounts, the memorial, Elise, David, the insurance letter. When I finished, Marion leaned back and let out a long breath. Well, she said, they picked the wrong grandmother to bury. I smiled. First time in days. They committed fraud, Ruth. That's not just immoral, it's criminal. If we can prove forgery or misrepresentation, we can file both civil and criminal charges. And get the money back? That too. I nodded. Good. Because they didn't just steal from me. They tried to erase you. Yes, I said, but I'm back. Marion Tills worked fast. By the following Monday, she had already filed preliminary motions to challenge the power of attorney and had drafted letters to both the hospital and the county clerk's office, requesting the original death certificate and any notarized documents attached to it. They have 10 business days to respond, she told me, sliding a copy of the letter across her desk. Meanwhile, we start collecting your life again. It sounded simple. It wasn't. The deeper we dug, the clearer it became. Elise hadn't just filed a fraudulent death certificate. She'd prepared for it, months in advance. She laid the groundwork like a professional, Marion said, frowning over the copies of the notary log Elise used. Camille Herrera notarized 6 documents on the same day, all related to you: healthcare proxy, financial power of attorney, living will, and the death certificate filing, all with the same signature. My signature. But it isn't, Marion said. Your handwriting is clean, rounded. These are sharp, rushed. I'll get a forensic document analyst to confirm it. Elise had forged everything. Your average criminal might have done it sloppily. Elise made it look legitimate. She even used the same pen across all documents. We needed more than suspicion. We needed evidence. Marion recommended a forensic accountant to analyze the flow of funds from my accounts. The man's name was Clive, and he spoke like a calculator. It's clean fraud, he said bluntly. They didn't just drain the account, they moved it into layered holdings. Elise opened 2 shell accounts under maiden name variations. From there, they ran funds through property deposits and private investments. How much did they move? He looked up. All of it, including the life insurance payment. The total stands at $578,600.84. I nodded slowly. I spent my whole life earning that. They spent it in 3 weeks. Less, he said. There's still movement on one of the accounts. They're still spending? I asked, stunned. Oh, yes, Clive replied. The last transaction was last Thursday, a reservation at a resort in Hilton Head. 5-star. Marion's jaw tightened. They think you're buried. They're celebrating. That was the first time I laughed. It wasn't a warm laugh. It was a rusted, brittle sound, like something sharp breaking under pressure. When I left Marion's office, the sky was gray with early spring clouds. I walked 2 blocks to the bus stop, then decided to keep going. My legs didn't move quickly, but they moved with purpose. I passed the corner bakery where George used to get cinnamon rolls every Sunday, closed now. I passed the old post office, boarded up and crumbling, then the library, which had become a daycare center. Everything had changed while I wasn't watching, while I was being erased. But the street names were still the same. The sidewalks still cracked in the same spots. The smell of the river was still there in the air if you paused long enough. So I paused. For the first time since the coma, I stood still and let the wind hit my face. Then I kept walking. not toward anything, but away from being afraid. When I got home, there was a car in the driveway, Elise's Lexus. I didn't stop walking. I opened the front door to find her sitting on my couch, her legs crossed, a mug in her hand, acting like she owned the place, because, in her mind, she did. "There you are," she said. "I've been waiting an hour." I took off my coat and hung it slowly, deliberately. "You're not welcome here. Ruth, let's be reasonable. We're family." "No, Elise. Family doesn't declare each other dead." She smiled, tight and practiced. "There were complications. The doctors weren't sure. David and I had to make quick decisions. You filed a death certificate, held a memorial, took my money." She stood. "You don't understand how hard it was, the stress, the uncertainty. David thought you'd never wake up, and you weren't handling your finances well before the accident. We had to step in. You didn't step in. You stepped over me." She walked toward me slowly, putting the mug down. "Look, what's done is done. We've used the money to stabilize things, pay down debt, secure investments. If we fight this in court, we all lose." "No, Elise," I said. "You lose. I reclaim." Her face twitched. "You're not thinking clearly." I looked her dead in the eye. "No, for the first time in years I am." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "If you drag this out, the family will suffer. David's reputation. The kids, they're not children anymore," I interrupted. "And maybe they deserve to know who their parents really are." We stood in silence, inches apart. "You don't want a war, Ruth," she said. "I'm not starting one," I replied. "I'm ending it." She didn't speak again. She just grabbed her purse and walked out. The next letter came certified. Marion handed it to me herself during our Wednesday meeting, her mouth a thin line. "It's from David's attorney." I opened it with steady hands, already knowing what I'd find. "Dear Mrs. Hallberg, we are writing on behalf of our client, Mr. David Hallberg, regarding the recent disputes and allegations of financial misconduct. Please be advised that Mr. Hallberg and his wife, Elise Hallberg, acted in accordance with documents legally executed under the presumption of your incapacitation. Any attempts to interfere with their legal control of assets or to initiate public accusations will be met with appropriate legal response." Below that, in smaller font, was a vague threat about defamation. "They're nervous," Marion said. "They should be." She nodded. "We'll respond, of course, but this confirms what we suspected. They're digging in." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake in the guest bedroom of a neighbor's house. I hadn't slept in my own home since Elise's visit. It felt wrong, like curling up inside someone else's lie. But I wasn't angry anymore. Not like before. Anger burns too hot to hold for long. What came instead was something colder, sharper. Resolve. The next morning, I met with Clive again. He brought charts, neatly labeled, color-coded, a full map of where every dollar had gone. Elise had used my insurance money to buy a share in a tech startup she had no background in. David had paid off both of their student loans, 20 years old, long dormant. They refinanced their home, took a vacation, bought a car. Not a cent had been saved. Not a cent had been earmarked for me. They hadn't just acted fast. They'd acted like it was theirs all along. "They treated your death as an opportunity," Clive said, "not a tragedy." He passed me one more document, a summary of the real estate holding for my own house. "They filed to have the deed transferred," he said. "Claimed you'd gifted the house to David a month before the accident." My mouth went dry. "They're taking my house too?" Not anymore, Clive said. We've filed a block on the title. Nothing can move until this is resolved. By the end of the week, Marion filed formal charges: fraud, identity theft, and financial exploitation of an elderly person. It triggered an investigation. The local news caught wind almost immediately. Small town, big scandal. A widow legally declared dead by her own family and brought back through court filings and medical records. The first reporter showed up on Friday. I didn't answer the door, but I saw the camera van parked across the street. On Saturday, someone left flowers on my porch. No note. On Sunday, David called. I didn't pick up. He tried again. Monday. Then sent a message. Mom, please. This has gone too far. Gone too far? As if I had started this? As if I was supposed to be grateful for the grave they'd dug and let them keep the shovel. That afternoon, I walked to the cemetery. Not to visit George, to visit myself. There, at the edge of Hillcrest Memorial Park, was a small marble headstone with my name on it. Ruth Elaine Halberg, 1945, 2023. She lived a quiet life of service and dignity, the same quote from the memorial pamphlet, the same lie. The grass was fresh, the flowers fake, the grave itself symbolic. They'd buried nothing but the truth here. I stood for a long time, reading the words they'd chosen to close my story. They thought they were writing an ending, but I wasn't done. The first court date came faster than anyone expected. Marion managed to push it through under emergency petition status, citing financial exploitation, fraud, and risk of asset dissipation. In plain English, if we didn't act fast, Elise and David might vanish with everything I'd spent a lifetime building. I arrived at the courthouse wearing my darkest coat, my hair neatly pulled back, a strand of pearls around my neck. The pearls weren't about vanity. They were George's last gift to me. I wanted them close. I wanted him close. Elise was already seated when we entered. Perfect makeup. Tailored dress. Her expression unreadable. David came in behind her, looking like a man walking into his own funeral. He avoided my gaze. Good. Let him sit with discomfort. The courtroom itself was small, nothing like the ones on TV. Fluorescent lighting, pale walls, an old clock that ticked loud enough to measure regret. The judge, a woman named Morales, took her seat without ceremony. We are here today in the matter of Ruth Elaine Halberg, she began, challenging the legal presumption of death, financial control via power of attorney, and claims of fraudulent asset transfer. Marion stood. Your Honor, my client is present today, alive and lucid, despite having been legally declared dead by her own family. We are prepared to present documentation of her medical status, evidence of forged signatures, and banking records showing misappropriation of funds exceeding $500,000. The judge raised her eyebrows, flipping through the files. That's quite a resurrection. A few chuckles in the courtroom. I didn't smile. David's attorney rose, a man named Simmons, all cufflinks and condescension. Your Honor, this entire situation stems from confusion during a medical emergency. Mrs. Halberg's condition was critical. The documents were processed in good faith under the belief that she would not recover. My clients acted to preserve the estate and make necessary financial decisions. Marion didn't even wait for him to finish. Necessary decisions? Like cashing in a $500,000 life insurance policy 2 days after she opened her eyes. The judge looked at Simmons. Did your clients attempt to verify death through official channels? They relied on hospital records and signed documentation, which we now believe to be forged, Marion added, sliding forward copies of the disputed signatures alongside samples from my voter ID, tax forms, and handwritten letters. The judge examined them carefully. "I see the difference." Simmons squirmed. Elise sat still as glass. Marion continued. "Your Honor, Mrs. Halberg was buried on paper, but she remained alive and conscious of the actions being taken against her. We are not here today merely to challenge a document. We are here to return a woman's name, rights, and dignity." I looked at the judge then. She didn't look away. It was the first time since the coma that someone in power looked at me like I existed. The judge finally spoke. "We'll reconvene next week for evidentiary hearing. In the meantime, all assets in question are frozen, pending investigation. That includes bank accounts, property transfers, and any claim to insurance benefits." Simmons tried to object, but she shut him down. "Your clients declared a living woman dead." "The court will proceed with caution." Gavel, strike. Done. Outside the courtroom, David tried to approach me. "Mom?" I stopped him with a look. "Don't." He looked old, not older. Old. The way people look when shame replaces oxygen. "She said you wouldn't make it," he said quietly. "The doctor said you had no brain activity. I didn't know what to do." "You could have waited. You could have sat by my bed and held my hand." "I did." "No," I said, voice low. "You signed my death behind my back, and you spent my life like it was a mistake you needed to fix." He blinked. "We thought we were doing what was best for you. You were doing what was best for yourselves." He looked like he might cry. For a moment, I felt something almost like pity. But not quite. Marion touched my arm gently. "We should go." As we walked away, I didn't turn back. Let David stand there, among the wreckage of his choices. Let Elise hold on to the lies. I had more important things to do, like coming back to life. Properly, this time. The day after the court hearing, I opened the cedar chest in the hallway closet. Inside were old files George and I had kept. Tax returns, property deeds, even the warranty for our first washing machine. He believed in paper trails, said if it wasn't written down and signed, it never happened. In a folder labeled Ruth Legal Personal, I found what I needed: my original will, my medical directives, and a handwritten list of passwords I'd last updated in 2015. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was using the past to prove I still had a future. I spent most of the morning sorting through it all, documenting everything Marion might need. When I paused for lunch, I realized something strange. I was hungry. Properly hungry. Not out of boredom or routine, but with a sharp clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. That was something too, wasn't it? The return of appetite. A body reclaiming itself. While I ate, the doorbell rang. I stiffened, plate still in hand. Another reporter? Another neighbor? No. Standing on the porch, awkward and unsure, was a young woman with a camera bag slung over one shoulder and freckles dusting her cheeks. "Hi," she said gently. "You don't know me, but my name is Anna Keene. I'm with the Wilmington Ledger. I wanted to speak to you, off the record, if you prefer." She looked nervous. She was too young to fake calm. I hesitated, then opened the door wider. "I'll give you 10 minutes." She followed me into the kitchen and sat at the table like she'd been taught to sit around older women. Straight-backed, respectful. "I read about the case," she said, "but I also read what they didn't print. Elise Halberg has ties to 3 other probate cases in the last 8 years, all involving elderly clients, power of attorney claims, and rapid asset transfers." I blinked. That wasn't in the court brief. No, ma'am. I found it while researching. 2 cases were settled quietly. The third was dismissed. Lack of evidence. And you think I'm the fourth? Anna nodded. You're the first one who lived long enough to fight back. I felt the air leave my lungs in a slow exhale. I'm not interested in interviews, I said. Not yet. I understand. But if there's anything you want made public when the time is right, I'll publish it. Not for clicks. For record. She stood, then hesitated. For what it's worth, I think you're brave. I didn't feel brave. I felt old. Tired. But I nodded anyway. Come back when it's over. That night, Marion called. We have a break, she said. Camille Herrera, the notary Elise used, just gave a sworn statement. She never met you. She notarized those signatures as a favor to Elise, who claimed you were too ill to appear in person. Is that enough? It's fraud. Plain and simple. We'll have it entered as evidence next week. The next day, I visited the cemetery again. Not the fake grave, the one next to George's, where I'll actually rest someday. I sat on the bench nearby and spoke out loud, like I always used to when he was gone on long trips. They buried me on paper, Georgie, I said softly. But I wasn't done living, and I'll be damned if I let them write my ending without asking me first. A breeze stirred through the trees. The air felt lighter, like the ground, for once, wasn't pulling me under. The evidentiary hearing was set for a Tuesday. By then, Elise had stopped making appearances. Only her attorney showed up, pale with the strain of bad headlines and worse clients. David still came, but never spoke. Not to me, not to Marion, not to anyone. He sat stiff and silent, like a man waiting for a verdict he already knew he deserved. Marion brought everything. Timelines, signatures, voice recordings from hospital staff, even photos from Harold's phone showing me waving from the porch 3 days after my date of death. The pièce de résistance was Camille Herrera's notarized statement, complete with apology. She lied to me, the notary wrote. I believed her. The judge listened carefully, flipping through page after page. Her expression never changed, but her eyes grew colder the longer she read. Then it was Simmons's turn. Elise's lawyer. He tried, bless him. He rattled off excuses. Medical miscommunication, compassionate intentions, legal gray areas. He emphasized how long I'd been unconscious, how uncertain my prognosis had been, how Elise had only done what any responsible caregiver might do in her place. Responsible caregivers, Marion said calmly, do not collect life insurance on living people. They do not drain accounts. They do not plan funerals. Simmons shifted, lips pressed tight. Judge Morales leaned forward. Has Mrs. Halberg's identity been fully reinstated with Social Security and the relevant agencies? Yes, Your Honor, Marion confirmed. As of last week. Good, the judge said, because this court recognizes her not only as alive, but as the sole legal owner of all disputed assets, effective immediately. I didn't exhale until the gavel struck. Frozen accounts were released, property deeds corrected, life insurance funds flagged for reversal, and a fraud report was passed to the district attorney for criminal review. David stood up like he might say something. Apologize, maybe. Or explain. But I turned my back before he got the chance. That afternoon, I returned home alone. No reporters, no Marion, just me in a quiet house that had been scrubbed of Elise's scents, slogans, and smug little throw pillows. I sat on the porch with a cup of tea and waited. Not for someone to visit, not for closure, but for silence. True silence. The kind you earn. That evening, a small envelope slid through the mail slot. Handwritten, no return address. Inside was a check. Not from David, not from Elise. From the insurance company. Reinstated payment to Ruth E. Hallberg, full policy value. $500,000 apologies for administrative error and delayed correction. I folded it neatly and placed it in the top drawer of George's old desk. There'd be time to move it later, open accounts, decide what to do. I didn't need the money. I needed the win. The next morning, I opened a new bank account. Not at the same place where they'd once labeled me deceased. I chose a small credit union instead, the kind with human tellers and potted plants that looked cared for. When the woman at the desk asked if I wanted to designate a beneficiary, I said yes, then paused. I wrote a name she didn't expect. Melanie Rose Hallberg, my granddaughter. David and Elise's only child. She was 25, working in another state, and had called me only twice in the last year. Both times after holidays she'd missed. But I remembered her as a teenager who once spent a whole afternoon brushing my hair while we watched old cooking shows. She was quiet then, gentle, before her parents taught her to treat affection like currency. I didn't owe her anything, but maybe she still had time to unlearn what they taught her. When I got home, I found a voicemail waiting. Not from David, not from Elise, from Melanie. Grandma, I saw the news. I don't know what to say. I'm sorry. I didn't know any of it. I didn't even know there was a funeral. Are you okay? Please call me. Please. Her voice cracked near the end. I didn't call her back right away. Instead, I brewed tea and sat down with Marion's latest letter. The DA's office had officially opened an investigation into Elise Hallberg for insurance fraud, identity theft, and elder exploitation. David hadn't been charged yet, but his name was on every document. And now that Elise had quietly retained new criminal defense counsel, it was only a matter of time. Marion included a note. If they reach out to settle privately, don't say yes. Let them sweat. So I waited. Not impatiently, not angrily. Just with quiet power. The way my mother used to wait for apologies. Not because she needed them, but because the waiting forced the other person to face themselves. That afternoon, someone knocked on the door. Not Elise, not David. Melanie, in jeans and a college sweatshirt, with circles under her eyes and no makeup, like she'd driven straight through the night and barely stopped to sleep. Grandma, she whispered, as if she didn't trust the word yet. I let her in. I didn't say much. She sat across from me at the table and cried quietly into a napkin. I didn't know, she said. They told me you were in a coma, and then that you'd passed. I was in school, and they said you didn't want a funeral, just a quiet cremation. I never even... She broke down again. I didn't comfort her with words. Instead, I poured her a cup of tea. The same way I did when she was little. Sugar and milk, even though she used to insist she liked it plain. She drank it in silence, then looked at me with her father's eyes, but none of Elise's coldness. What happens now? She asked. I looked out the window for a long moment before answering. Now, I said. Now I live. Melanie stayed the night in the guest room, though I don't think either of us slept much. In the morning, I found her in the kitchen making scrambled eggs the way I used to. Slow, over low heat, with just a pinch of dill. She looked over her shoulder sheepishly. I didn't know if you'd be up yet. I nodded, taking in the smell. I'm always up early. Comes with surviving things. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Grandma? Is it true about the money? I set the table. One plate, two forks. Which part? The part where they declared me dead? Or the part where they helped themselves to $500,000? Melanie winced. I had no idea, honestly. I thought the insurance was for funeral costs. Dad said you didn't leave a will, that you— He lied, I said simply. She went quiet. After breakfast, she followed me into the garden. The flower beds had gone wild in my absence, dandelions taking over the east fence, creeping vines spilling over into Harold's yard. I didn't mind. There was something honest about it. Nature takes back what we forget to tend. I want to help, Melanie said suddenly. With the garden? With everything. With you. I can testify, if it comes to that, or speak to the media, or, I don't know, just be here. I straightened up, wiped my hands on my gardening apron. You're not responsible for their crimes. But I'm their daughter. You're also mine. She looked at me, surprised. I didn't raise you, no, I continued, but you carry part of me, and maybe you can carry that forward differently than they did. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them away. I got a job offer last month, she said. In Oregon. I turned it down. I was scared to be far from family. And now? She looked down at the soil, then back at me. I think maybe distance is exactly what I need. I nodded. Take the job, Melanie. You're not angry? I'm proud. She hugged me. Not delicately, not like a performance. Just two arms wrapped around mine like she needed to make sure I was real. Before she left that afternoon, she handed me a small envelope. Inside was a Polaroid, faded, bent at the corners. A girl in a yellow dress standing in my kitchen, holding a wooden spoon bigger than her arm. I found it in a box last year, Melanie said. I used to love that dress, and that spoon. You let me stir cake batter with it. You got more flour on the floor than in the bowl, I said, smiling. She laughed. I was 6. You were Joy. That night, I placed the photo on the mantel, right where my obituary used to sit. The first knock came just after dusk. I had just poured tea and turned off the porch light when I heard it, soft, almost hesitant. I opened the door to find David. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. Hair uncombed, jacket wrinkled, no Elise beside him. Just my son, alone on the steps of a house he no longer owned. Hi, Mom. I didn't move, didn't gesture for him to come in, just waited. He glanced over his shoulder, like he half expected someone to pull him back, then looked at me. I don't know where to start. You start, I said, by using your name, not a legal team. He nodded, swallowing. I'm sorry. Are you? I asked. He took a shaky breath. I didn't know it would get this far. Elise, she told me everything was legal, that the doctors said you'd never recover, that we were just tying up loose ends. And the money? I asked. He flinched. She said it was ours, that you would have wanted us to have it, that we were just speeding up the inevitable. I stared at him. I spent my life building that inevitable. His shoulders sagged. I came to say I'll testify, he said quietly. Against her, if it comes to that. It will. I know. We stood there in the dark, the only sound the wind shifting through the branches overhead. I didn't come for forgiveness, he added. Good, I said, because I don't owe it. He blinked. You don't? No, I said calmly. You chose her over me, again and again. You didn't just believe her. You followed her. You signed my life away and slept through the funeral. I didn't sleep, he said, almost childlike. I haven't slept since June. Neither have I. He stepped back then, as if dismissed. I just wanted to say it. In person. I nodded. And I wanted to hear it. In person. Will I see you again? Not by invitation, I said. He nodded slowly, then turned and walked back down the steps, his head low. When the door clicked shut behind me, I didn't cry. I cleaned the kitchen, folded laundry, and for the first time in months, slept through the night. The next morning, Marion called. Elise has formally been charged, she said. Fraud, identity theft, insurance fraud, and 2 counts of elder abuse. And David? Still under review. His cooperation may keep him out of prison, but the civil suit will stand. Good. There's something else. She paused. The life insurance company offered a quiet settlement. Half the policy, no lawsuit, no headlines. I declined, of course. Of course. But I thought you'd like to know what they called it. What? She chuckled darkly. They called your claim unusually resilient. I laughed. Really laughed. It echoed through the house like something being unburied. That night, I sat down at George's desk, pulled out the same yellow notepad I'd used before, and began a new list. But this time, it didn't start with to reclaim. It started with to begin. Change the locks. Open a scholarship fund, visit Melanie in Oregon, plant a new garden. Write it all down. I didn't need revenge. I didn't even need closure. I just needed the next chapter. The courtroom was colder this time, not in temperature, but in presence. Elise sat at the defendant's table, her expression tighter than ever, lips pressed into a line that once used to smile for photographs. Now she didn't look at me. Not once. Not even when I took the stand. The prosecutor began gently, as if I might break. I didn't. Mrs. Hallberg, can you confirm that you were declared legally deceased on May 30th? Yes. Were you, in fact, deceased at that time? Clearly not. Some laughter in the gallery. Even the judge cracked a smile. He continued. And who filed the death certificate? Elise Hallberg. Your daughter-in-law. That's what the marriage license says. And did you authorize her to act as your power of attorney? No. Did you sign any documents granting her such authority? Never. Did she gain access to your financial records and assets after filing that certificate? She did. And she took them. He nodded, flipping through exhibits. To your knowledge, was she aware you were alive when she filed? I stared across the room, not at Elise, but just past her. The empty air where the lie had once lived. She knew. She visited me in the hospital the week before. I was unconscious, but alive, breathing, monitored, and she signed my death anyway. The silence that followed was different this time, heavier, like even the walls were listening. The defense didn't have much. They tried to argue confusion, miscommunication, urgent decision-making in the face of family crisis. But they didn't argue the signatures. Not after the handwriting expert took the stand and described in detail how each of Elise's forgeries betrayed her. The slant too steep, the loops too small, the pressure too erratic. And they didn't argue the money. Not after Clive presented the full audit. Over $570,000 rooted, hidden, spent, redistributed, all within weeks of the death. The timelines didn't lie. They couldn't lie. David was present, sitting in the back row. He kept his head down. I didn't acknowledge him. That chapter had closed. The jury deliberated less than 4 hours. When they came back, their verdict was unanimous. Guilty, on all counts. Elise didn't cry. She didn't plead. She just sat there, the same way she had sat on my couch that day with the mug in her hand, as if nothing was wrong, just waiting for the mess to clear. Only this time, she wasn't leaving my house. She was leaving in handcuffs. I didn't celebrate. I didn't cheer. I just stood, adjusted my coat, and walked out of the courtroom into the crisp October air. Outside, Marion joined me. She didn't say much, just held out a folder. Everything's finalized. Full restitution. Charges registered. Your name is yours again. Thank you, she smiled. You were remarkable. I shook my head. I was tired. Tired and remarkable aren't mutually exclusive. I went home and lit a candle on the kitchen table. Not for ceremony, for warmth. Then I opened a new notebook. The first page was blank, waiting. I thought for a long time before I wrote the first sentence. Not about Elise, not about David, not even about death, but about breath. They thought I was finished, but I was still breathing, and sometimes breath is all you need to begin again. The house grew quiet again, not from absence, but from restoration. I changed the locks first, then the curtains, then the paint on the front door, from tired white to deep, steady green. Not dramatic, not loud, just enough to make it mine again. Some days I forgot what they'd done, not in the way people forget names or appointments, but in that softened way the body sometimes forgets a bruise until you press it. Then it pulses, then it remembers. So I stopped pressing. Instead, I planted lavender in the west bed, basil and rosemary by the porch. I even dug up the old corner where Elise had tried to start a rock garden, replaced every stone with soil, every silence with seed. By late October, things had begun to bloom again. Melanie called weekly now, her voice steadier with each call. She'd taken the job in Oregon, a youth center of all things. I asked her once if she liked it. I don't know yet, she said, but I like who I am when I leave at the end of the day. That's something. It was. We planned a visit for spring. I told her I'd bring the lemon cake recipe and an old wooden spoon. One night, Harold came over with pie, still warm, full of cinnamon and apology. I should have checked, he said. When they told us you'd passed, I should have come by anyway. You did what you thought was kind, I replied. That's more than most. We sat on the porch and ate in silence. Not every wrong needs a speech. Some just need presence. Later that week, I got a letter from the county registrar. A stamped confirmation of identity reinstatement, complete with embossed seal. The paper was thick, official. Ruth Elaine Halberg, it read. Living. Verified. I pinned it inside the hallway closet door, not for show, but for safekeeping. Not to remember what they tried to take, to remember what they couldn't. People asked if I'd keep the money. Some quietly hoped I'd donate it, as if virtue demanded it. Others whispered I should spend it all, take trips, buy something indulgent. I did neither. Instead, I sat at George's desk, now mine alone, and set up the paperwork for a scholarship fund in his name. The Halberg Second Chance Grant. For women over 50 returning to school. Women who had been told they were finished. Women who had been buried in expectation and doubt and silence, and came back. The insurance company agreed to double the donation in exchange for settling the civil suit. I didn't smile when I signed the agreement, but I felt something stronger than satisfaction. I felt clean. That evening, I lit the fireplace for the first time in years. Not out of necessity, but ritual. I sat on the floor with a cup of tea and stared into the flames until the room blurred at the edges. Then I took the old obituary, the one they printed for the memorial I never attended, and fed it, piece by piece, into the fire. It burned fast. Thin paper always does. When it was gone, I sat back, took a long sip of tea, and whispered into the glow, "I'm not done yet." Winter came gently that year. No sharp winds, no ice storms, just a quiet cold that moved through the bones like memory. The kind of cold that doesn't bite, just reminds you of what you've survived. I filled the house with small lights, soft ones, over the sink, in the hallway, around the porch railing, George built by hand. Not for decoration, for warmth, for proof that something was alive here, that someone was home. One morning, I found a letter from the local university, a thank you note from the first recipient of the Halberg grant. She was 57, a mother of 3, left a difficult marriage and was going back to study nursing. "I didn't think anyone would bet on me at this stage," she wrote. "But then I read your story. That was when it hit me. I wasn't just back. I was visible, named, counted. I existed in someone else's hope now, not as a lesson, but as a lighthouse." In March, Melanie flew me out to Oregon. We didn't do much, just drank coffee on her small balcony, walked through foggy parks, and talked like we hadn't wasted years letting silence speak for us. She called me Gran again. I didn't correct her. On the last night, we cooked dinner together. Salmon and lentils and that lemon cake we always used to botch. It still came out too dense, but neither of us cared. "You really forgave me?" she asked. I looked her in the eyes. "You didn't betray me. You just believed people who did." She nodded slowly, holding her mug close. "You think they'll ever change?" "Elise?" I said. "No." "Dad?" I was quiet for a moment. "He might, but that's not your job, or mine." Back home, spring came early. The garden exploded. Lavender, mint, daisies I never planted, maybe seeds carried by the wind. I let them grow. Not everything has to be controlled. Some things are better wild. A reporter called in April, asking if I'd give a televised interview. I said no. Not out of fear, but because I'd already said everything I needed to. I didn't want applause. I wanted peace, and I had it. One evening, I sat on the porch, watching dusk settle. The sky was the color of bruised violets, and the air smelled like new soil. I thought of all the women like me, buried early, praised for silence, dismissed as fragile, erased without permission. I thought of how many of us wake up in hospital beds to find the world moved on without asking. If you're one of them, if you've ever been told you should be grateful just to survive, while the people around you steal your name, your work, your worth, let me tell you this: you're not done. You get to come back. You get to reclaim. You get to write the next page. Not with rage, but with clarity. Like breath. Like truth. If this story found you, share it. With a friend, a sister, a stranger. Leave a comment. Say something. Don't let silence finish what someone else tried to erase. They buried me on paper, but I was still breathing. And that was enough.